guys, it's Charlotte back with another video. In this video we will be learning how to do rust streaks, so go ahead and follow along and we'll get started. Alright, so as you can see, we're going to start with our chassis system 2-bay hopper. I've already used a little bit of Vallejo's Burnt Umber along the top. It's an acrylic paint. I just went ahead and did some small patches of rust along the top edge to get us started. And we're going to use our dark rust powder to go ahead and just lay down a light layer to start off with. So this is going to just be the backdrop for our streaking. We're also going to go along the top. Since the top of the car is what gets hit with the most weathering, we're going to put a lot of rust up there, and then we're going to go ahead and streak that down the sides to start our base layer. You want to make sure you have a little bit thinner of a brush, that way you can get all the way up underneath the walkway with your rust. Alright, the next step in this process is we're going to use that same rust colored powder, and we're going to use that just to kind of pull down from the top that rust color as to make a nice base for our streaks that we're going to be adding. After you have finished up with using your rust powder as your base, kind of streaking that down the car, you want to go ahead and do a dull coat over that to seal that before you start the next step. For our next step, you want to have a thin, wide brush. We're just going to dip that in some odorless thinner, and then you want to go ahead and dab that out on a paper towel just to get most of that thinner off. And then we're going to go ahead and lay down a light layer of that thinner over the car and the spots that you want your streaking on. Now that you have that thin layer of thinner on there, you want to make sure you do your oil paints on that before it dries. Okay, for our next step, we're going to grab our light rust oil paint, and we're just going to make a few small dots along the top right over where we put our rust spots at. And then we're going to do a few smaller dots directly underneath of the larger dots that we put along the top on our rust spots along the edge of the car. So you want to make sure you get those lined up pretty well because we're going to drag down this rust in the same spots. Next, you want to take that same brush that we had used earlier to put the thinner on. We're once again going to dip that in some of our odorless paint thinner. Go ahead and dab most of that off on a paper towel again, and then you want to try to line up the brush so that it's perpendicular to your car. And you want to try to have a steady hand and go straight down. It might help to rest your hand on your other hand, or if you have something small to kind of rest your hand out to give you some better balance, that might be helpful. But you want to just drag straight down with it. And as you can see, there we have our rust streaks. With my car, I didn't love how those last two streaks turned out, so I went back and I touched them up a little bit with some of that paint thinner. Again, repeat the same process. You always want to make sure to try your best and go directly down, just like gravity would be working. You want that going straight, so if you are accidentally, depending on the curve of your hand, you might be pulling to the right or to the left a little bit, and if that happens, that's okay. You can always use some of that thinner and a Q-tip and remove that rust streak and try again. Now I'm just going back and cleaning up some of my rust streaks with a micro brush applicator here. It's got a little bit of paint thinner on it, so I'm just kind of removing some of the streaks, cleaning them up. You want to let your streaks dry, and then after they have dried, we're going to go back in with some raw umber oil paint and touch up the same areas of those dark rust spots that we had done originally with our acrylic paint, just to make everything look a little bit more cohesive. Some of these rust streaks I did with the method that we had seen in a previous video, where we hand paint the rust streaks, just pulling that down a little bit from the spot that we had already created. I still used that oil paint in the same colors, but I just did it by hand instead of using this new method with doing the dots in the odorless thinner to make the streak. Alright guys, so this is our finished car. As you can see, I went ahead and completed it after we did our rust streaking. I did that with a combination of powders, acrylic paints, and oil paints, kind of using some of the techniques that we had seen in the previous videos. But our main goal here was to show you guys how to do the rust streaks. So as you can see, they turned out pretty well, so hopefully this helps you guys with your adventures in the rust streaks. If you guys have any tips for me or tricks, you can leave them below in the comments. Otherwise, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys!